Welcome to Electronic Postgraduate Pathshala. I am Kapil Kapoor. I was Professor of English and concurrent Professor of Sanskrit in JNU for several years. Currently, I am Chancellor of Mahatma Gandhi Antarashtriya Hindi Vishwavidyalaya, Wardha, Maharashtra. I have been teaching Paninian grammar in JNU to students of linguistics and others for several years. And today I am talking of the paper whose title is Paninian Grammar. This is my second lecture and this is the second module that we are handling today. This module is about Indian linguistic tradition, Bharatiya Bhasha Adhyayana Parampara. It's about this. In the first one, we had talked generally about the Indian and the Greek and the Western traditions. But today, we focus on the Indian tradition, Indian linguistic tradition, Indian tradition of language thinking. From the ancient times, we had said this in the first module also, from the Vedic literature itself, because Vedic literature is the world's earliest and oldest literature. In the Vedic literature itself, there is a lot of reflection and thinking about language. I will pick up some high points, highlights today. For example, in Aitareya Upanishad, a question which is handled is, what is the source of language? Bhasha ka srot kya hai? And the Upanishad says that language has two sources. Bhasha ke do srot hain. Pran or man, breath and mind. Breath and mind. Breath, remember, it is the breath we inhale which keeps us alive. So it's called prana. Prana. And this breath we hold, it is called vyana. And when we exhale it, it is called apana. So, but it is a prana, the air we inhale, which we use to speak. Therefore, remember that when we are speaking, we are using the oxygen which is meant for the body in order to produce sounds. Therefore, we are taking away energy from our own body to speak. That's why our elders used to say, speak less, kam bola karo, and conserve your energy. So, Aitareya Upanishad says there are two sources. One is breath, prana, and this is the physics of language. Physics of language. Language is made up of breath. And the other source is man, mind. The other source is the metaphysics of speech, that language is made up of thinking. Thinking. It has something to do with thinking. It is constituted by breath, and it does not become language unless it has thought, unless there is a thought in it. Thought. So physics and metaphysics, this is the first question. Source, nature of language, several reflections. I'll not go into them, but I'll read it to you. The first, the second paragraph of your module, where it said that the second Aranyaka describes prana to be at the root of speech and designations on which the knowledge of the whole universe rests. The relationship of inhaled life-supporting breath and speech comes in for more reflection. The third Aranyaka tells us that Kansarva saw a union of speech and prana. Vak Pranch Samhita iti Kansarvaha. Further, we are given the insightful observation that when one recites or talks, then breath enters the speech. जब हम बोलते हैं या गाते हैं, तो breath हमारा उसमें घुल जाता है. उस मोमेंट जब हम बोलते या गाते हैं, फिर हम सांस नहीं लेते. जो सांस लिया होता है, उसी का प्रयोग करते हैं. And when we are asleep, जब हम सो रहे होते हैं, then speech enters breath. तब हम बोलते नहीं, हमें अगर कभी बड़बड़ाते भी हैं तो हमें नहीं पता होता. तब हमारी जो स्पीच है, it dissolves in breath. जब हम गाते हैं, बोलते हैं, breath dissolves in speech, and when we are sleeping, speech dissolves in breath. So this is the first very insightful observation, and it has many ramifications, that because with the way we think about the world, we put it in words, and when we put it in words, we name the objects of the world, because when we name the objects, we know the objects. So the world we know is the world we have named through our language. So there are two sources, the physics and metaphysics of languages, two sources, pran and mana. Second question which is handled is, how is language organized? भाषा की संरचना कैसे होती है? भाषा की संरचना क्या है? 5 स्तर, 5 levels are identified. 5 levels are identified. पहला है साउंड का, ध्वनि, वर्ण, उसको हम कहते हैं वर्ण. माइंड यू, आवर वर्ड वर्ण इज़ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. तो वर्ण जो है ये, it is used for sound, it is also used for color, and it is also used for what people call caste. And remember, it's clearest in the color, that in the colors we cannot separate one color from the other. There is no arbitrary line where one color ends and the other begins. In the same way, in speech, there is no line where one sound ends and the other begins. They are all continuous. In the same way, even in the human society, there are no castes separate from each other. It is a continuity. One merges in the other. It is artificial when we cut and segment and say, this is this, this is this, this is this. So, varna. First level is varna, sound. Second level is akshar, syllable. You know that a vowel can form a syllable by itself. जैसे आ, हम कहते हैं ना, to call somebody, come. What do we say for come in Hindi? A, ao, come. So one vowel itself can be uttered. What can be uttered, what can be pronounced is a syllable, akshar. A consonant, vyanjan, cannot be uttered. That is why in our Devanagari alphabet, under ka, kha, ga, gha, nga, we put a halant mark. We put a mark down. That halant means it cannot be uttered. But when we say ka, it is that ka plus a, kha plus a, then it can be uttered. Then it is a syllable. When we say ka, what we are uttering is a syllable. So the second level of organization is syllable. Just say ja, go, come, आओ, खाओ, eat, खा, eat. किसी को कहना हो खा, eat. Kha is a syllable, akshar. Kha, the kha and a, kha. So syllable, बचाना, बढ़ाना, बढ़ना, घटना, एक से ज़्यादा syllable जब जोड़े जाते हैं तो तीसरा स्तर बनता है, शब्द. पहला स्तर है वर्ण, दूसरा अक्षर, तीसरा शब्द. जैसे कमाना या कमाओ, कमा, अर्न या कर्ण. अब कमा में क और म 2 अक्षर हैं. 2 अक्षर मिलके शब्द बना कमाओ, अर्न कहते हैं ना, कमा, कुछ कमा कहते हैं ना बच्चों को, कुछ कमा, बड़ा हो गया है. सो दिस इज द लेवल ऑफ वर्ड, शब्द. तीसरा स्तर है. और जब हम किसी शब्द का प्रयोग करते हैं, शब्द का प्रयोग करते हैं उक्ति में, बोलने में, when we use a word in saying something, in making a statement, then that word has a grammatical form. See, try to understand. The word is in the dictionary, like boy, ladka, boy. Ab in the dictionary, that boy is a shabd word, but when I say I saw that boy, now this boy refers to a particular individual. So I am using a word in speech, and when I am using it in speech, then it has grammatical properties. What are the grammatical properties? It is singular, it is masculine, it is accusative, मतलब ये एक वचन है और उत्तम पुरुष है, like that, grammatical properties. और ये शब्द का जब प्रयोग होता है और उसमें शब्द के साथ व्याकरणिक कोटियां जुड़ जाती हैं, grammatical elements are combined, it becomes a पद, morphological construction अंग्रेजी में कहते हैं, morphological construction. Now 4 लेवल हो गए ना, वर्ण, अक्षर, शब्द और पद. और जब हम पदों को कंबाइन करते हैं, जोड़ते हैं, when we combine morphological constructions, we have an utterance, an ukti, a वाक्य. वाक्य में और वचन में फर्क है. In English we say there is a difference between sentence and a statement. A sentence like the king of India is bald. It is a sentence. It is a good grammatical sentence, grammatically correct. But factually it is not correct, because India has no king. India does not have a king. So when I say king of India is bald, in grammar I give an example, it is a sentence. It does not relate to the reality outside. But when I say India does not have a king, then I am saying something about the reality. Then it is a statement, vachana, statement. So king of India is bald is a good sentence, but a bad statement. A good sentence, but a wrong statement. Grammar deals with not with vachana, it deals with vakya, with utterance. There is a difference between ukti and vakya. वाक्य एक व्याकरण का यूनिट है, ग्रामेटिकल पूरा यूनिट है, complete unit. It's a complete unit. It has a subject, it has a verb, it has an object, and all that. But an utterance can have the status of a sentence, but it can be made of a single word. जो उक्ति है वो एक शब्द की उक्ति हो सकती है, पर अर्थ उसका वैसे ही होता है जैसे वाक्य का होता है या स्टेटमेंट का होता है. जैसे इन एक्चुअल कन्वर्सेशन आई में से जाओ, गो. नाउ गो इज वन वर्ड, बट व्हेन आई एम सेइंग गो, व्हाट आई एम सेइंग टू समबडी इज यू गो देयर, यू गो. और मैं कहूँ खाओ. Now one word, but what I am saying is you eat this or that, whatever, all this, it is understood. तो एक शब्द का वाक्य है वाक्य, ये एक ही शब्द से वाक्य बना है ये वाक्य, और ये उक्ति है क्योंकि ग्रामेटिकली कंप्लीट नहीं है. खाओ, लोग अगर कोई और पूछेगा, सुनेगा दूर से, वो कहेगा क्या खाओ, ईट व्हाट, हु विल ईट, कौन खाएगा, so he will eat. So it is an incomplete sentence grammatically, but a complete sentence as a ukti, as an utterance, as a meaning, as an utterance, okay. So this is the pada combined into utterance. Indian grammatical tradition, in Indian grammar deals with ukti, it deals with vakya, and it takes even, that's why Bhartrihari defines 8 kinds of sentences. 8 kinds of sentences. How a single verb can be a sentence, how a single noun can be a sentence, but it deals with a vakya, both implicit vakya and explicit vakya, the Indian grammar. That's one. So 5 We are talking about that the second issue is organization. First was source, now organization. 5 स्तर हैं, वर्ण, अक्षर, शब्द, पद और वाक्य. Then इनका अध्ययन हुआ. These were studied in the grammatical tradition. Vर्ण, sound was studied in the Shiksha Granth. There are still manuscripts available in libraries. Banaras Hindu University alone has 80 manuscripts of Shiksha Granths. There are 2 kinds of phonetics Granth texts. One which deal with general phonetics, and second which deal with the pronunciation of particular texts. Pronunciation of particular texts. The general phonetics texts are called Shiksha, and the particular texts are called Pratishakya. Pratishakya, the word itself is very clear. Pratishakha. Each school has its own pronunciation. For example, today in India, people in India speak English in different ways. Tamil people speak English in one way, Punjabi people in another way, Bengalis in another way. That's why people in jocular mood say, Pinglish, Tinglish, Binglish. There is no English. There is Punjabi English, there is Bengali English, there is Indian English. In the same way, there was Sanskrit. And Rajshekhar in the 7th century, 8th century has described different varieties of Sanskrit. And in fact, he has expressed unhappiness with the way Sanskrit is spoken by the Bengalis of all the people. He has expressed. So, and also the way harshly it is spoken by the Punjabis. So these schools of the same poem, let's say, Sanskrit poem, sung by different people in different ways will be a shakha. And the phonetic text which deals with that is Pratishakya. So the 2 kinds of text. Then the aksharas, akshara, syllables, are also studied in Shiksha Granth. Shiksha Granth, general phonetics. And they tell you what can be combined, what sounds can be combined into syllables, what cannot be combined into syllables. Now the third level, Shabd, has been studied in the tradition, pre-Panini time also, what is called the Path Parampara, Path tradition. Path, this word today we mean as if it means a lesson, or it means to read something in a ritual way. But Path technically means enumeration, comprehensive listing. So there were, before Panini, many pathas available. The people would make a list of words which appears in the text, all the list. What is today called concordance. Concordances were made and lists were made, and those words were combined in different ways to form different texts, and those different combinations were remembered by different people, so that at any time the original text can be reconstructed, even if 1 or 2 of the disciples either become mad, or they go away, or they are no longer available, or they have forgotten. So number of people remembered the text in different combinations, pararimi and paraiskol. So phonetic, these are Patha tradition. So Patha tradition was focused on the words, combination of syllables into words. So the words were listed, combined, and so on. In fact, technically, they dealt with morphemes. The basic units, which are beyond syllable. But it's a little technical. Maybe when you read linguistics later on you will realize. But the point is that, for example, in Bulwana. So in Bulwana there is a wa and there is bulana, and there is bula and there is na. So there are 3 parts there. These 3 parts are there, and they are arranged in a particular order. And that order is niyatit, it is also fixed. The word within the word, the order is fixed, right? The order between words is not fixed in Indian grammar, Indian language, but within the word, the order of elements is fixed. So these Patha tradition showed how the words were formed. As I said in the last lecture also, how Shabdas were formed. That was the That was the concern of the Path tradition, and this Path tradition led to Nirvachana, Nirukta, etymology, and Yask's Nirukta is the culmination of the Path tradition. So Yask in fact made first of all he made a Nighantu, a list of the different kinds of words, divided all the words into 3 sets: words dealing with the earth, words dealing with the heavens, and the word dealing with human life and world. And this kind of semantic classification, which we later see in the Thesari and other things, he did that. And then he took up those words and showed how those words were formed from the roots, verb roots, dhatu, they were formed. And he then said how he did this because the Vedic words, with the passage of time, the words in the Vedas had become opaque, difficult to understand. Their meaning was lost or meaning changed. You know that as in language, the sound as well as meaning both change over a period of time. A word may mean one thing in 15th century, in 18th century it will have a different meaning. And it can happen that some words are lost. Some words are no longer, they are anavagata according to Yaska. So people don't know what they mean. They lost the meaning. So they were not able to understand the meaning of Vedic texts. And there was a whole school, materialist school, which said that there is no use reading Vedas because Vedas are meaningless. There are no meanings because the meanings had become difficult. So Yaska, in order to defend the Vedas, in order to explain how Vedic texts can be studied, can be made sense of, can be interpreted, he developed a science of Nirvachana, etymology or exposition. And he developed, he raised several issues he raised in the process. The basic principle he said was that you must try to explain how the word is formed. And his assumption is, and it is a correct assumption, all Sanskrit words are formed from verb roots, and the verb roots have a fixed meaning. There are limited number of verb roots, only 1957 verb roots in Sanskrit. And Panini has made a list of these verb roots. All Sanskrit words are formed from these verb roots. And Yask, in order to give us the meaning of a word, he traces the word to the verb root. And the verb root has a fixed meaning. So the meaning is generated from the verb root. Now, the word as it is and the root from which it comes, it can have the same form, it can have a different form, modified form, or the form can be completely different. The best exposition is if the form of the word and the form of the verb root is also the same. So he said that is the best. But if it is not so, then meaning is the basis. The form, the meaning of the verb root should be that the root whose meaning is close to the meaning of the word in use. That root is treated as the source of that word, even if the form does not resemble. And third, of course, is, and then he says, if you are not able to find any relationship, any explanation, even then you must give an explanation, some explanation, speculate, so that the next scholar who comes and works, he will start from there. He will not start ab initio. So this is a great principle. Yask was a great devotee of knowledge, and he differed from the phoneticists who said your pronunciation has to be correct even if you don't know the meaning. And Yask said a person who utters a mantra correctly but does not know the meaning is like the bearer of a sealed letter, or he is like a pillar which simply supports the weight of the roof. And then he says, eternal is the scorn of the ignorant for knowledge. And he says knowledge is primary, meaning is primary. And that way, his method of interpretation, it led to a whole science of interpretation, what is called the Mimamsa Sutras in Sanskrit tradition ideas. So Mimamsa philosophy is the science of interpretation, and Yask led to that. In the process, he raised many interesting questions, and if you read your module, you will find this. In the process, Yask has taken up many issues of theoretical interest. He talks of language change and variation over time and space, and identifies deletion, modification, metathesis, and intrusion, addition, as the four processes of which show the language change. Remember, Chomsky had three. Three are from these four: deletion, addition, modification. Lopa, vikar, agam. But Yask has fourth, the vikara, viparyaya, the metathesis, the shift of order within the sounds. So, and then also says, he talks of the variation in usage in a region spread out from Afghanistan to Assam, and discussing the nature of meaning. He talks of 6 kinds of modifications of meaning of the verb root. Words are used to designate object with regard to everyday affairs in the world on account of their comprehensiveness and minuteness. And he describes philosophical, social, and psychological factors that influence meaning. He discusses 3 types of hymns, poetry in sacred poetry, 3 types, and 7 subjects of those poetical compositions. And he goes on to discuss the philosophy of gods, saying all the names of gods are ultimate names of one source, one source. So these are different names given to the same one God. He says it's like a girl in the family will have so many names. She'll be a daughter, she'll be a granddaughter, she'll be a sister, she'll be a mother, she will be an auntie, she'll be a niece, she's a grandniece. So the same girl is so many. In the same way, the same one ultimate principle has so many names in the philosophy of God. He was a great thinker, and it's a pity that he is not studied with greater attention in the departments. So this led to Mimamsa. This was the Shabda. Now, he divided all words into 4 parts of speech: Nama, Akhyata, Upsarga, Nipata. 4 parts of speech. Nominals, verbals, those which are verbals, then prefixes, and indeclinables, avyayas, like adverbs and prepositions and conjunctions. And he talked about the 4 parts of speech. Now see, what Yask did, he showed you this word which has such a different form has been derived from this verb root. Let's say, Pachak from Pach, Pachak from Pach, or driver from drive. But it's very simple. But inability from able. Inability from able. He said, he explained this. Inability is from able. Now, Pach to Pachak, he said. But then, how does Pach become Pachak? What is Ka? How does A become A? Pach become Pa? And what is Ka? What is the meaning of Ka? This is the function of Panini's grammar. So Panini started from Yask, and he showed how words acquire the final form through grammatical operations of prefixation, suffixation, infixation, modification, sandhi. And therefore Panini is made possible by Yask's work, and the task was made simpler by Yask. That's why Panini, in his very brief grammar, 32,000 syllables, not even words, has been able to describe a natural human language comprehensively, explicitly, and in a rule-bound manner. It is said in the tradition that before Panini there was a huge grammar by Vyadi of 100,000 shlokas. He reduced it to 1,000 shlokas, 4,000 sutras. And they say he put an ocean into the footprint of a cow, grammatical ocean into the footprint of a cow. And the grammar, Panini's Ashtadhyayi, became a timeless grammar. That is, you can explain. What does the grammar do? It shows you how the word is well formed, how it is formed, and a word which passes through those rules, and the rules can explain that word is acceptable, that word is grammatical. So the pada, it is the pada, the fourth level, which is the domain of grammar, how padas are formed. And because the pada in a sentence are related to each other on the basis of meaning, the very formation of pada has relationship to meaning. That is, for example, the agent, karta. So karta has a form. So the word will become what we today like say Ram ne. But the moment you say Ram ne, or we should say Ram ko, so when you say Ram ne, then we say Ram karne wala hai. और राम को, तो राम को कुछ दिया गया, राम को कुछ हुआ. Accusative case, nominative case, कर्ता कारक, कर्म कारक, कर्म कारक. Now, because the padas have these grammatical relations, therefore Panini does not go to the level of sentence at all. Because in Indian grammar, an ukti, an utterance, is an arrangement of shabda, an arrangement of padas, and padas are shabdas which are related to each other through grammatical relationship. Grammatical relationship. So there is no need to go further. You will be able to interpret the utterance at the level of grammar, at the level of pada, karaka relationships, karaka relationship. Now this model, there is one small question that people have asked: what is the real? Is the sound real? Is the word real? Is the syllable real? Or is the pada real? Or is the vakya real? There are two schools of thought. One, they say, let's say that the words are real, and when words have the meaning and their meaning is put together, it becomes a sentence. Syllables are real. When they are put together, they become a word. You see, the ultimate constituent, sound, is the ultimate constituent, what the phoneticists said. But the dominant school reached the conclusion, it's not possible to give the arguments here, that the real constituent is the vakya, the sentence. And words, the meaning of words becomes concrete when they occur in a sentence. Just as when we take a word out of the dictionary and use it, only then that word has a meaning. In the dictionary, it has meaning only on pages. It has no meaning. That boy in the dictionary does not refer to a particular boy. But when I use the word boy, it refers to a particular boy. In the same way, it is the sentence which is holistic, total, and the words acquire a meaning. And words are the unit, and the aksharas are analyzed on the basis of words. So Panini's grammar is a top to bottom system. टॉप टू बॉटम सिस्टम, ऊपर से नीचे एनालिसिस होता है. वाक्य को अक्षरों, शब्दों में, शब्दों को अक्षरों में, अक्षरों को वर्णों में. नॉट बॉटम टू टॉप, नॉट बॉटम टू टॉप. और इट इज इन द गेस्टाल्ट थ्योरी, इट इज होल वर्सेस पार्ट्स. It is the whole which is real, and it is the parts which have existence in terms of the whole, in terms of the whole. And the model is what is called an affixation model. Now, I think in a fixation model, when I say a fixation model, जैसे शब्द, Yask showed that a shabd is made up of root plus certain affixes, right? Root plus affixes. Now Panini's grammar shows in what circumstances, in what contexts linguistic context, phonetic context, morphological context, sentential context, meaning context. Those particular parts can be joined, the affixes can be joined to the base. Affixes can be joined. In what conditions, in what sentences? So it's an affixation model. An affixation model, and this model is, if you look at your this module, the model of Paninian grammar, you see that words at the top we have the word shabd in Indian tradition has more than one meaning. It can mean a morphological construction, it can mean a word, it can also mean a sentence, and it also means language. Shabd. So it can also mean sound. When Sanskrit says Shabdabda Kuru, don't make noise. Don't make noise. And Shabd also means language. Shabdanushasana, Panini's grammar, Patanjali says, is the discipline of language. Shabd. So language, Shabd. So here you have Shabd at the top. Now Shabd are of two kinds. They are the nominal ending and the verbal ending. Then each one, nominal and verbal, are of two kinds. There is the base and there is the affix. Base and the affix. And then the bases are basic or derived. Basic or derived. And the grammar describes this entire thing and gives you the operations by which these are combined. Now there are two kinds of affixes, derivational and inflectional. That is, an affix which is used to turn the part of speech into another part of speech. जैसे now adjective को noun बनाना है, abled को ability बना दिया, हाँ? और पाचन पच से ही पाचक बना, पाचक से वही से पाचन बना, पाचन क्रिया, that is digesting, और पाचक cook, and pach is the verb root, which simply means to cook. So ये जो different, how one word can be changed into another part of speech, that is derivation. And the other is inflection. Like nouns have their own grammatical elements, which I said, number, gender, person, case in English it is used, and tense, aspect and mood it is there, although we don't use those terms separately, but they are called vibhaktis. They are all pratyayas, they are all affixes. Some of them are vibhaktis, which are used with nouns, and some vibhaktis are used with the verb. Now, how does this grammar work? It has 5 texts. Ashtadhyayi is not just one text. It is the sutra patha, the rules, roughly around 4,000 rules. They are called Ashtadhyayi, and it has 5 supporting texts. Ancillary texts, 5 ancillary texts. There is the Dhatu Patha, a list of verb roots. There is the Ganapatha, a list of nominals. And there is the Pratyahara Sutras, a list of sounds of Sanskrit, what are called phonemes, arranged in particular way by Panini. And there is the Linganushasana, that is the gender affixation. And then there are exceptional Unadi Sutras, the rules of exceptions. You look at your module, where we say that the grammar is made up of lists, lexicons and rules. 3 parts: lists, lexicons and rules. Lists are those which are contained in the grammar itself, sutra part itself, and lexicons are separate from the sutra patha, and the rules themselves are in the sutra part itself. So if you look at the following lists and lexicons are available, refer to lexicons which are referred to in grammar. They are not inside the grammar, they are referred to Dhatu Path and Ganapath. The lexicons which are not referred to in grammar, Linganushasana. Then lists. Lists are inside the grammar. If you read them, Upsarga, Nipata and Pratyayas and verb roots related derivation affixes, these are listed inside the grammar. All the Karak affixes, all the Vibhaktis are listed inside the grammar. And the processes of combination, how X can be combined with Y, in which place, under what circumstances, that is the operational part, which is the sutra part, the rules of grammar. The rules are of 7 kinds. Rules themselves are of 7 kinds. They are also, I think, listed here. Yeah, they are listed just before this, what I have just shown you. They are listed here, 7 kinds. Adhikara Sutra, the topic rule. Sangya Sutra, definitional rule. Paribhasha Sutra, meta rule. Vidhi rule, injunction to do something. Nishedh, proscription, not to do something. Then a niyama, a contextual conditional limitation. And atidesha, extension rule. 7 kinds of rules are there in grammar, and it's a very it's a ekvakyata. The entire 3994 sutras constitute a single utterance. So a grammarian, a Sanskrit grammarian, remembers it all. He doesn't have to, search for it, because the Karaka rules are at 3 places. So is the meaning, the forms, then the particular form at another place. So he is able to generate from the 3 different places. And it's a complex system to interpret, to understand a rule. To interpret a rule, you have to be aware of all the other things, like adhikara, like pratyaya. He says pratyaya. That is, this is adhikara sutra. They says affixes. Now, till he changes the topic, all the rules deal with pratyaya. So pratyaya will be understood. He will not every time repeat it. And how does he change the topic? It's an oral grammar. It is an oral grammar. A Panditji who announces, utters this text, he will change the tone. It is the falling tone or the rising tone which marks the change of topic. So when you say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. When I say 7, you know it has come to an end. So pratyaya, and that means I am going to talk about these things. And then the falling tone, and then it will stop and the other will begin. Now this grammar is based on a philosophy, on a theory of grammar, which is not contained inside Ashtadhyayi, but which Patanjali explains in the first Ahanika of his great commentary, Mahabhashya. The object language for Ashtadhyayi is of 2 kinds: Bhasha, spoken language, and Chandas, written, compositional language, Vedic language. So he does not use the word Sanskrit at all. The word Sanskrit is not used. It's not used even by Patanjali. It is a grammar of language, spoken language. And there are people who argue and ask whether Sanskrit was ever a spoken language. The very first sentence, it's a language of grammar. It's a grammar of bhasha, spoken language. And if it were not a grammar of spoken, if it were not spoken language, how will sandhi appear? Sandhi does not take place in writing. It only takes place in speech. So Sanskrit was a spoken language, and the spoken language of that time was the object, and also the compositional. The language which was the spoken language, but which was complete and careful, because in writing, every language has a Prakrit Roop, which is Bhasha, and a Samskrit Roop, which is compositional. So T.S. Eliot, when he writes his poems, he writes in English. That English is compositional English, Sanskrit English. Nobody speaks that kind of English on the street. And yet, Eliot's English is a spoken English, is a spoken language. In the same way, the Vedic Sanskrit, the language of the Vedas, was the language taken from a spoken language, but it is compositional. It is Samskrita, not Prakrita. Much later, both these words became proper nouns for 2 languages, but beginning it only meant Prakrit, natural spoken language, Samskrit, carefully, Samahakrita, leveled language, idealized language. There is no time here how to go into all those principles, but I have listed them here in your module, that the object language and the authority, what is the theory which is behind this grammar, And therefore, I will now sum up by saying that this grammar has had a long influence, long time influence. It still exercises influence on modern linguistics. For example, a lot of computational linguistics around the world is being inspired by the Sanskrit grammar, by Panini's Ashtadhyayi, and in fact, Panini's Ashtadhyayi serves as a proto-modeling device, a proto-grammar for writing, the grammars of the e-grammars of various languages and working on e-texts. In the last paragraph in your module, I have said it inspired many grammars. In the early centuries of the era, it influenced Persian through Persian, the Arabic grammar. In India, Chandra Vyakaran is a Buddhist non-terminological recension of Ashtadhyayi. A Tibetan grammar was prepared by Thonbi Sambhota in the 7th century. In the 11th century, Hemachandra Acharya prepared a grammar of Prakrit, modeled after Panini, and then grammars of Kannada and Malayalam were also composed after 12th century. And in 20th century grammar of Hindi, Pandit Kishoridas Bajpayee's Hindi Shabdanshashan is modeled on Ashtadhyayi's analysis. It is the object of study in many European and American universities that have produced celebrated scholars of, apart from other areas, Sanskrit grammar. And Panini's Ashtadhyayi is the ideal model for describing all Indian languages. All Indian languages. It is the ideal fit, perfect fit for Indian languages. Thank you very much.